Engine start. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Liftoff of the space.
In our natural pursuit of knowledge, space has always mystified and beguiled us. Over the past 5 decades, we've pushed the final frontier inevitably onward into the ether. The cost has been colossal. Now every day, new data, new conclusions, and the thirst for deeper exploration propel us inexorably onward. The advantages of the discoveries made through space travel are myriad, but the fundamental curiosity as to what is out there will always fascinate and taunt us. Come with us now into the unknown and discover the disappearing frontier. This week, we return to our examination of the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System. The initial letters, TDRSS, produced yet another word for space terminology. The system is now usually referred to colloquially as TDRS. TDRS is a communication signal relay system which provides tracking and data acquisition services between low Earth orbiting spacecraft and NASA control and data processing facilities. Last time on this program, we learned that the TDRS network consists of 2 major segments: the orbiting constellation of tracking and data relay satellites, known as the space segment, and the Earth-based control and support facilities, known as the ground segment. The space segment was in geosynchronous orbit approximately 22,000 miles above the equator. Originally, all the TDRS satellites were positioned in view of the single White Sands ground terminal in New Mexico. Once in place, each TDRS employed what is termed as bent pipe communication system. If you think of the transmission links between the ground complex and a spacecraft as a pipe, the TDRS system is the bend in the pipe, neither processing nor altering any signals, but simply redirecting them. Essentially, each satellite is a repeater, receiving transmissions from the ground terminal or from an orbiting spacecraft, amplifying them and retransmitting them. Each tracking and relay satellite, weighing over 2 tons, was stowed into a folding configuration and ferried into a low Earth orbit aboard a space shuttle. From there, it was lifted into its high geosynchronous orbit by an inertial upper stage booster rocket, also known as an IUS. Once the TDRS was deployed, correctly positioned and thoroughly tested, it was ready to begin its various relay and communications and tracking services. The normal space-to-ground communication link between the Earth station and the TDRS was by way of a 2-meter steerable dish antenna. If that link, which operated at K-band frequency, was to fail, the ground controllers could establish a limited capability backup S-band link. Tracking and data relay satellite S-band on the antenna can be seen here, protruding above the solar sail assembly. 2 parabolic dish antennae and a set of 30 phased array elements were used for communicating exclusively with orbiting user spacecraft. When the tracking and data relay satellite receives transmissions for a single access service destined for user spacecraft, it extracted them from the composite ground-to-space uplink and retransmitted it through one of its 2 parabolic dish antennae. If multiple access services were scheduled, the data was retransmitted through the phased array of 30 antenna elements mounted on the tracking and data relay satellite body. The 30-element phased array antenna was electronically steerable, could handle communications traffic from multiple spacecraft simultaneously, although at much slower rates than a single access antenna. The communications relay between the tracking and data relay satellite and the White Sands ground terminal in New Mexico consisted of 2 links, a composite uplink and a composite downlink. The composite uplink signal contained commands for the user spacecraft and the satellite itself. Tracking and data relay satellite was able to disseminate this information and pass on the appropriate commands to the spacecraft user. At the ground terminal site for the TDRS operation, located at White Sands in New Mexico, 3 60-foot space-to-ground link dish antennae maintained an invisible lifeline to the tracking and data relay satellite, over 2,300 miles away. Located next to the giant antennae was a smaller S-band antenna, which provided the backup communications link to a particular tracking and data relay satellite if its prime K-band link via one of the 60-foot antennae failed. Several simulation and testing antennae can be seen on the roof of the ground terminal building. The ground terminal operation was responsible for performing the complex data processing involved in providing user services and for extracting tracking information during scheduled tracking services. White Sands also provided verification and testing services and maintained a control center which continuously monitored and controlled the health and safety of the TDRS. All data entering and leaving the White Sands ground terminal passed through the NASA ground terminal, or NGT, which was co-located in the same building in New Mexico. The NGT served to interface the ground terminal with the rest of the network by formatting information going to or coming from other space network facilities such as the Goddard and Johnson Space Flight Centers, and by monitoring and reporting on data quality. Additionally, the NGT performed line outage recording to save data in case the communication link to the user failed. It could also serve as an emergency mission control center in case the Johnson Space Center's capacity for manned mission control functions was reduced. The NASA ground terminal was also linked to other NASA facilities through the NASA Communications Network, better known as NASCOM. As NASA's global communications system, NASCOM was essentially the heart of all NASA communications, providing online operational support to all NASA projects. This vast network was under the technical management of the NASA Communications Division at the Goddard Space Flight Center. The TDRS concept played an important part in many space operations, such as the Hubble Space Telescope. Goddard Space Telescope Control Center personnel control the health, welfare, and orientation of the Hubble. By virtue of a dedicated communications channel, TDRS enabled the control center to function without having to share resources with other space projects. On the other hand, a multi-mission TDRS operation could use groups of common hardware to simultaneously support many spacecraft. Although projects shared multi-resources, each had its own mission operations room for monitoring and controlling its spacecraft. Payload Operations Control Centers, or POCs, interface directly with the principal investigators to plan payload experiment operations and determine support requirements. These requirements were then submitted to the Network Control Center for subsequent approval and scheduling. During real-time operations, the POC was responsible for generating and transmitting the commands to the spacecraft and analyzing return telemetry to control payload operations and instrument sensors. Scientific data returning from user spacecraft was often routed to other facilities at Goddard for processing and distribution. These other facilities existed to provide efficient processing and transfer of data from the network to the end user. Usually, these facilities receive telemetry and image data directly from NASCOM in parallel with the POC. The Flight Dynamics Facility generated and distributed view period information and environmental conditions pertaining to POC spacecraft. These scheduling aids helped the POC to decide what types of services could be scheduled and at what times. Another section at Goddard oversaw and directed the compatibility and testing of spacecraft with the tracking and data relay satellite system prior to spacecraft launch. Through this required compatibility testing, hardware compatibility problems were identified well before launch, preferably at least 6 months. Recordings and statistics collected during compatibility testing were also valuable for later use in operator training and simulation exercises. Simulation tests provided end-to-end evaluations of overall network efficiency and were used to validate normal and contingency operational procedures. Since its launch in 1983, data relayed through TDRS has been critical to scientists investigating both near and deep space phenomena and Earth science. Some of the more significant accomplishments include confirmation of the constant background radiation left over from the Big Bang, multi-band observation of the Shoemaker-Levy comet impact on Jupiter, and exhaustive imaging of the Earth, which has been used for agricultural, industrial and other purposes. The original tracking and data relay satellite service has now been upgraded with enhanced data processing capabilities and new generation technology, with plans already in place to further expand the system well into the 21st century. TDRS, another example of the National Aeronautic and Space Administration bringing the planet together by way of low Earth orbiting spacecraft and NASA data processing facilities. Since the earliest time, man has imagined this moment. The moment when his fellow man would make the first journey to the moon. Now the time had come. In the 6th decade of the 20th century, the ancient dream is to become a reality. The flight of Apollo 11 was the culmination of many years of planning, working, building and testing. Thousands of people had contributed towards this day of accomplishment. The great Saturn V rocket and the complex Apollo spacecraft had been assembled together and moved to the launch pad. The equipment and techniques and personnel had been proved in earlier missions, and now they were ready. The astronauts chosen for this mission had flown it many times in ground-based simulators. They had all been in space before. They had trained carefully and well, and now they too were ready. Astronaut Michael Collins would pilot the command module. Astronaut Edwin Aldrin Jr. would pilot the lunar module. And astronaut Neil Armstrong would serve as mission commander. Armstrong would be the first man to step upon the moon. July 16, the day had come. The moon awaited. The men rose early, ate breakfast, and dressed in their spacesuits. Other astronauts had made this journey to the launch pad, but never with such anticipation. 9:32 a.m., July 16. 3 hours later, the Apollo command module moves forward to extract the lunar module from the third stage of the launch vehicles. Both are moving at 17,000 miles per hour. Docked together, they will sail 250,000 miles across the sea of space and into orbit around the Earth's nearest neighbor. During the 3-day journey to the moon, the astronauts kept busy. Checklists, navigation and observation, housekeeping. They must work in a weightless environment, keeping their spacecraft and themselves in good condition. Data must be collected and reported. Experiments must be performed, including photography inside and outside the spacecraft. Because of the film speed, these actions appear faster than they actually were. July 19. Apollo slows down and goes into orbit around the moon. The bright blue planet of Earth now lies 238,000 miles beyond the lunar horizon. Astronauts Armstrong and Aldrin, now in the lunar module, separate from the command module. Astronaut Collins remains behind. Preparation to the lunar descent to the moon now begins. Command module assumes the new name, Columbia. The lunar module will be called the Eagle. From Columbia, Michael Collins' camera sees bright rays of the sun reflecting patterns of color from the surface of the Eagle. In this strange metallic bird rides the ancient and endless dream of all mankind. Now they are close.
Roger, 1201 alarm.
Very close.
Where go? Same type. Where go? Altitude, velocity, light. 8.5 down. 220 feet. 13 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely. 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down. 60 seconds. Lights on.
Dust is kicked up from the lunar module's retro rockets.
Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drifting to the right a little. That's okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle.
The Eagle has landed.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Through the window of the Eagle, Armstrong and Aldrin see what no human eyes have ever seen before. Their spacecraft casts a long shadow across the undisturbed dust of centuries. "7 hours after landing, when all the careful preparations for the ascent has been completed, Armstrong opens the Eagle hatch and makes the climb down to the surface. First footsteps on this strange new world must be taken cautiously. The moon has only 1/6 the gravity of Earth. And those now familiar words. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Once on the surface, Armstrong scoops up a small sample of lunar dust and rock, a precaution against the possibility of an emergency takeoff. According to plan, astronaut Aldrin descends from the Eagle. He and his equipment would weigh 383 pounds on Earth. Here they weigh about 66 pounds. An American flag is left behind on the moon, together with medals honoring American and Soviet spacemen who lost their lives in earlier space tests, and a small disc carrying messages of goodwill from 73 nations on Earth. A plaque on the lunar module reads, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." July 21st. The Eagle and its two-man crew lifted off the moon perfectly and slowly climbed to dock with Columbia. A welcome sight to Michael Collins waiting alone. Once again, the bright blue planet Earth rises over the lunar horizon. For those who had witnessed man's landing in the Sea of Tranquility, the moon would never again appear quite the same. The returning voyagers splashed down perfectly. Safe. To protect from possible contamination, the astronauts put on special airtight garments before coming aboard the rescue ship. They transferred straight from the helicopter to a mobile quarantine van. July 27th. Home again. Two men had walked on the moon, and Earth would never be the same.